Hello, I'm John Grom, and welcome to our 50th Right and Left Discussion Forum. The purpose of our discussion forum is to demonstrate that potentially contentious topics can be discussed in a constructive, civilized manner. But I think that maybe today's topic will put that idea to the test. But before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the contribution to the forum of 10 individuals who served on our panel over the last 49 programs. In alphabetical order, they are Tim Burns, Bruce Darlington, Tom Finley, Sharon Gandy, Tom Grace, Mike Kovack, Larry Land, Sharon Ray, Dave Scott, and Natalie Sidorenko. Thank you very much for your contributions. Today we're going to expand on our last topic, which centered on why we believe what we believe, by discussing some of the biases that lead us to our beliefs. Today's panel, beginning on my left, is Bryan Laubaugh. Bryan is president of R&B Financial Services. On his left is Dr. Ronald Chamberlin, retired senior electrochemist. On his left is Jerry Ritzman, chairman of the board of Ritzman Natural Health Pharmacies. And on his left is Patty Haskins, member of the Wadsworth City Council and retired math teacher. Bryan, in our last discussion, we pretty much agreed that our beliefs are based on our biases, that we either adopt on our own or are imposed on us by accident of our birth. Many of these biases fit neatly into categories on the political left or right. Are there biases that you can think of that would be common to one political side or the other?
I think over the last probably 10 or 15 years, there have been some biases that I think people would identify with. For instance, the left seems to have co-opted the notion that they are the be-all, end-all when it comes to dealing with minorities, that they have the answer, no one else has the answer. They've also sort of taken on the mantra of global climate change, climate warming, all that. So I think that there obviously are certain groups of people that feel that they can represent those that have issues better than others. I think one of the biases that I've just started to, and I know it's been out there for quite some time, and unfortunately the media has put their magnifying glass on it, is the sort of the bias that we're beginning to see against our men and women that serve in uniform as policemen and women. I think it's really sad that a small group of maybe police officers that might not adhere to the protect and serve motto, have sort of created a real problem with police in general. And I don't think it's fair. I think the bias that we're beginning to see in the media with inflammatory words when they describe a shooting. I was watching one just the other morning, and the newscaster said that, the young man was gunned down. I think that term "gunned down" is certainly pretty strong. When you start to read about the story and you find out a lot of stuff that went into it, I think these men and women are put under put in a pressure cooker every day they go to work, that they're not sure whether or not they're going to be shot at or in an altercation. And I just think we need to really ratchet down this rhetoric about our men and women that serve. And that bias seems to be growing because anymore, they're not getting the necessary respect that I, growing up, that was sort of much. It was pretty much something that we always respected the police officer and the police men and women. So I think that's sort of a bias that I think we really need to.
And you think that bias then would lead to a belief that police are racist?
I think it does. I think we're seeing it right now with our Justice Department. Some of the things that they've come out with dealing with the sad situation in Ferguson. I mean, I don't agree with what happened out there. I feel badly, but that police officer was put in a in a very, very dangerous position. So I don't think you can easily just say that, you know, all police officers are racist. I don't believe they are. I know that I'm sure there are a few out there that have those unfortunate tendencies, but I don't believe all policemen and policewomen carry that.
Are you aware that 2 policemen were shot in Ferguson last night?
I just heard about that. A sniper, one was shot in the face, and another I think was shot in the
Shoulder.
Would you credit that to the belief that, on the part of some people, that police are generally racist?
Yeah. And I don't think it doesn't serve the purpose at all when major media outlets feed that bias. You know, I think we really need to step back and look at what's going to happen in the end, a lack of respect for these men and women.
Ron, where are you coming from on this issue?
I don't think it's really that biases are necessarily bad, and biases do lead to beliefs. What's the difference, really? I've thought about this at some length. Where I came from, I grew up in a small town, blue-collar parents, blue-collar neighborhood. My parents were, therefore, naturally, Democrats. Well, okay, that's fine. I heard some jokes against a very funny one. I was about 7 years old at the time, and I understood it about Harry Truman and a stallion. But never mind.
I think I know that joke.
You probably know that joke. But okay, then into my college years, I was helping my roommate run for an office, and gee, that was kind of fun. And then Adlai Stevenson came to town. The town was right on a railroad, and he was on a whistle-stop tour across the country. So we made some signs, went down to greet him happily, and very upset when he lost. So those things get reinforced, and my anti-war bias came about during Vietnam. I became increasingly polarized about that. When the Kent State shootings happened, that turned the corner for me. Okay, my bias then is against the government's role in violence and warmongering. That's my bias, and I immediately see soldiers as being not especially innocent in this, until I get to know someone as a person. Then that's different. And I think that's the big point. Our biases color our beliefs, and our beliefs, if not considered, if not examined, can lead to an entrenchment of our thought, can lead to a concrete position that can fall apart as soon as you get to know somebody. I think many police have a bias that, yeah, these black folks are dangerous out here. White folks are just as dangerous. And I think that's a healthy bias for a policeman to have. You say you don't know if they're going to come back in one piece at the end of the day. And if they didn't know that, if they didn't think that, they could let their guards down a little bit. They can't react too viciously and too precipitously, like the case in Cleveland where the 12-year-old kid was shot. There's pros and cons about that. I mean, you can see the police officers, but maybe he wasn't trained enough. Maybe he wasn't ready to stop back and consider. So, yeah, I think biases are real. Biases are there. They're beliefs, and we have to keep examining those beliefs, try to increase our sphere of knowledge.
I'll ask you another question later, but not right now. Jerry, where are you coming from on this issue?
Oh, I may be approaching it in a little bit different manner, but I'm looking at it in how we try and frame up what we believe and the models that we build in building our belief system. And I look at science and medicine, and we make observations in the lab, and Ron, you can support me on this, and then we try and build models to say, well, why does this happen? When we do A or B and it leads to C and D, what is the model there? And we build these models not only in science and medicine, but also in our everyday life, so that we can have some order or some rationality behind what we think. And so these models will work for a while in the scientific world, but as we discover more and more, we try and fit causes in we say, well, if we do this, this is what's going to happen. And when it doesn't, then it's time that we step back and look, is the model that we built to explain what has happened and then to project what will happen. Is that model that we built or that theory that we built, is that correct? And sometimes we're reluctant to go back because those beliefs, that model sometimes becomes a dogma. It becomes something that we cannot challenge when we should step back and say, well, with the information we had 20 years ago, this scientific model worked. But we have more information now. Maybe we need to rethink what the model
Maybe
is.
A and B have changed, but we still believe in C and D.
Exactly right, and we need to do that. And that's difficult to do because for a while that fit comfortably into, and the results that we got out of our reasoning were good, and they fit. But when they don't start fitting anymore, maybe we need to go back and really closely examine the models that we built on cause and effect.
But that belief that we adopted based on that, and that model has become part of who we are. And you're asking us to change our personality by recognizing that A and B have changed.
Yes, that's
It's getting
difficult.
a little too esoteric here.
That's
but,
difficult. It's difficult. So yeah, but I would agree.
Patty, I'm anxious to hear what you think.
You know, when you put out the question, you know, what biases do we have, and you sit on the political range, I think that at this particular point in time, we are so divided as far as politics are concerned. And it's on both parties' sides, and it's because of the biases that they have. Democrats look at Republicans and say that they are opposed to minorities. Of course, just sweeping under the rug the fact that in the 60s, these Southern Democrats were the ones that were probably the most racist we've ever seen in our lifetimes. Of course, that has changed quite a bit since then. We look at the Republicans and say that they are not scientific, that they tend to look for answers and ignore scientific answers. For example, climate change and this type of thing. We look at Republicans and say they are the party of big business, which might be true in as much as you have more Republicans in the upper echelons of businesses. But we use that as a negative when we talk about them, that Wall Street is handled by that they are a party that promotes war, and they're not happy unless they are war. On the other side, Republicans challenge Democrats. I mean, every time you turn on the news, and if it's a right-wing person that is speaking or conservative that is speaking, they talk about the tax and spend Democrats, that the only way that Democrats solve problems is by throwing money at them. They look at Democrats and say that they're an entitlement nation, that they think that that by giving money to the poor, that they're teaching the poor to stay poor. They're not encouraging them to pull themselves up by the bootstraps and get out of poverty. When you look at all of those biases that have, and they've actually strengthened over the years, what that ends up doing is forcing both sides to form into two camps that become farther and farther apart. We look at the Tea Party. If you ask any strong Democrat, they're going to tell you the Tea Party is a bunch of loons, not accepting the fact that while I may not agree with everything they say, there might be some things or ideas they have which are valuable. You look at those that oppose, from the other side, that oppose unions and say, well, hey, those unions, they're just driving the country into ruins, and we should have right-to-work states. Wisconsin just voted to be a right-to-work state. But yet, if you look at the average income in right-to-work states, it's way lower than it is in union states. And the fact that our middle class is disappearing might be due to the fact that we have in public unions, I think it's down to about 6.7% of people that are members of unions. But it's that bias against that other side for that particular viewpoint, I think, that has driven the wedge between the parties and prevented them from civilly discussing issues and coming up with solutions for problems which we have.
Patty, that's about the best explanation I have ever heard about the division between the left and the right, divided according to their biases. And I'm going to read your mind for a moment, and you're thinking that both sides exaggerate in their mind the biases of the other side.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I find myself doing it too. I mean, you know, the conservative speaker on television comes on, and I'm immediately thinking, I'm not going to agree with him. And you really have to pull yourself back and force yourself to listen and say, okay, no, wait a minute, I do need to listen. So,
you know, I think Patty brings up a good point. I'm kind of wondering why I'm down here and Patty's down there this time, because we usually sit next to each other.
yeah.
I wonder if you were sort of concerned that there was some bias, that there might be some sort of a brawl breakout between
Well, I
Patty
don't
and I.
like it.
So that's why we have the two people
Well, it just
here.
so happened it was your turn to sit in the first
I
seat
know.
and hers to sit in the
Do you have a
last.
bias against?
Try to.
You know, that's the problem, I think, and the extremes of the issues. I was raised in a home. My father was a Democrat. My mother was a Republican, and there was spirited debate at times. But I think,
Call it mixed marriage.
yeah. But I think the Democratic Party that my dad believed in is not really the Democratic Party that you would recognize today, because and Republicans as well, because the extreme of the Democratic Party has pulled it so far to the left that the people that are sitting there in the middle, that I think Patty would be a good representation of, because she listens to things, she's a great counsel person, she understands where other people are coming from, she's willing to compromise, and the same is true with the Republicans. We're getting so jerked so far to the right that most Republicans are saying, well, what are you talking about? We want to shut down government? Is that what we're about? Yeah. You know, do we have to go to that extreme? I don't believe so, and I think we really have to start. You know, someone has to call a truce and say, come on, guys, let's get to the middle and let's start governing for the people. You know, I mean, you listen to some of the great statesmen over the years. I'm kind of wondering if they would even recognize their own parties today. Mm-hmm. You know.
I wonder if, you know, each party, whether they're kind of being held hostage by the extreme wing of their parties, and that's whom the media focuses on, is the extreme wing, the Tea Party or the whatever the extreme wing of the Democrat Party is. But most of the individuals in that party, I don't think, ascribe to those extreme beliefs. Mm-hmm. I don't believe so. And so what do you do?
But as long as they think the voters do, that's where
Right.
they're going to put their tent.
And just one other thing, John, and Patty, you mentioned you listen to, or whenever you view somebody that's going to say something on TV or you read in the paper, and how many times are they introduced as so-and-so from the conservative think tank, such and such, or this person who is from the liberal think tank of this, and all of a sudden you're going to throw up your defenses or accept everything that they believe. Mm-hmm. Why? And in the paper, it's so-and-so Democrat from whatever state. Get rid of those labels. Just say, here's a guy, and here's his opinion. Yeah. Or this senator from whatever state said this. Don't label them Democrat or Republican.
And leave it for you to guess.
And let you read it and say, boy, that sounds like a good idea. Or it sounds like not a good idea, and not prejudice us. Prejudice us. I would urge the editors to do that.
I have a good friend who I read a lot on Facebook when I don't talk to him directly. He everything, there's a conservative thing or something about the Republican Party, he prefaces it to say these reprehensible retrograde Republicans have done it again. So that's not a great attitude. Really.
Well, you posted something on Facebook talking about Republicans displaying a rare
moment of
sanity. That's what it was. Yeah, I thought, oh, come on, Ron. There's a definition of bias that it's easy for me to accept. Bias is a partial perspective often accompanied by a refusal to consider the possible merits of alternative points of view, not having an open mind, lacking a neutral viewpoint, and often synonymous with prejudice and bigotry. Is that about the way you would view bias, or is that a little strong?
It's a little strong in terms of making it synonymous with prejudice and bigotry. Though that can happen. I'm sure that can happen.
That says it's often synonymous.
Yeah.
Bias is just a bent to one side or the other.
Everyone has
It doesn't
biases.
have to be.
Yeah.
I have a bias towards Breyer's ice cream. When I go in, I want to buy what I feel is the best, and I think everyone has a bias
Haagen-Dazs.
towards Patty loves Haagen-Dazs. Some people might like Ben and Jerry's. I mean, so I don't think it's all bad, but so often it's synonymous with, some sort of a racial undertone or some bigotry of some, I mean, there's so many isms out there anymore. It's hard to keep up with when you look at those types of things.
There was a discussion on, I think I've mentioned before, a debate series on something called Intelligence Squared.
Yeah.
Look it up if you. And anyway, there's one on the. It's on bias, but it has more to do with the impact of the internet on bias. And one of the things that they pointed out, and I guess I knew this but hadn't really concentrated on it too much, when you go onto Google and do a search on something, that kind of gets locked into Google's account for you.
Yeah.
And it's going to look at what were you doing the search on. And if you do enough searches on a certain kind of a topic, they're going to be leading you in the direction of things that match what they think are your biases. And they gave a good example. If two people went onto Google and just put in Egypt, one will get a series of stories about the what do they call it? The something spring, the Arab Spring,
Arab Spring,
and how there was an overthrow and so forth. Another one might talk about artifacts. It depends on what, the Google would lead you in the direction and in effect reinforce the biases that you already have. People do want to tend to go seek out information that reinforces the biases that they have.
I remember in my first year in college, we had everybody took an introductory psychology course, and there was a little tale about there that says, "Oh, here's the student. He emulates the liberalite and the college student or the young professor. He'll buy the tweed jacket with the leather patches. He smokes a pipe. Maybe has a little beard because that's the mindset. That's the group that he wants to belong to. That's the biases that he has, and those get reinforced by belonging to that group. And I think this is the same thing.
There are biases that you mentioned your anti-military bias. That was something that you selected based on your own experience. This wasn't something that you were born with. But there's something called an implicit bias. And this is something that we don't really control, that we all are a package of experiences and interactions with other people. And inside of us, there is a set of implicit biases that we may not even know that we have. For instance, it's awfully hard for me to think in terms of meeting somebody of a certain nationality, say an Italian. Right away, there are certain things that pop into my mind about somebody being an Italian. They're biases. I think that Italians tend to love art and music more than a lot of other people do. And they tend to eat spicy foods, and I'm going to be thinking things about the qualities and characteristics of that person because they're Italian or they're Polish. They must love sausage. But those are those things inform us about the world that we're living in, and there's not a whole lot we can do about it.
Well, when we were cavemen and we heard a roar in the night, we were not going to go out and investigate what it is. We figured that's probably a saber-toothed tiger.
Or thunder.
Or thunder. Either way, I don't understand it and I'm afraid of it.
Yeah.
And I think that's it. If you don't understand it, you'll be afraid of it. And that's where your biases come in.
Yeah. Where I get concerned about biases is that they, we talked about it being politically more polarized than ever before. and that biases have an awful lot to do with that, and it can lead us into some real poor decisions about voting. One of the things that concerns me is that when I hear people talking about candidates that they would like to vote for, often it has nothing to do with the job at hand. Not looking at the duties and responsibilities and what kind of experience is required. I looked something up. The EEOC, Employment Equal Opportunity Employment Commission, has uniform guidelines on employee selection procedures, and it spells out through hundreds of pages that employee selection, promotion, and compensation levels be based on factors that are actual requirements of the job. That you can't insist that someone, for instance, have a set of skills that are normally trained in the first 5 days of the job. You can't use that as a reason for not hiring someone. They have to, you have to consider only those things that are directly related to the job. But we don't use that kind of a criteria when we're picking the President of the United States or our local congressman or senator. We feel free to base our decisions on just about any old thing. They like their dog, or they got cute kids, and we'll go ahead and vote based on that sort of thing.
Or they have the same last name as somebody that I knew a couple of years ago
really liked
in
him.
the office. I really liked him.
Sure.
Or her.
Or I don't like people named Bush.
Yes.
Well, wasn't it in Ohio for years? It was Brown.
Or Clinton.
Was the name? If your last name was Brown, you would get elected.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Doesn't it still work that way? Sharon got in.
Yeah, for good reason, though.
Good job, Kevin, sure.
That's my bias.
Anyway, thank you very much. That's thank you for your contribution today, Patty. You just clarified things that I've been struggling with. Anyway, here's a quote from E.B. White. I don't know a whole lot about him except I liked him in high school. I have yet to see a piece of writing, political or non-political, that does not have a slant. All writing slants the way the writer leans, and no one is born perpendicular. Good for E.B. White. Thank you very much.